So then we go on to verse 16. While all this was happening, your eyes saw my substance being yet unformed. Substance being yet unformed is another phrase that we had to take a large number of words in English to equal one word within the Hebrew, and it literally means to wrap together, and it refers specifically to the unformed mass of the embryo. So even in Hebrew, they understood that concept of a cluster of cells being the earliest form of the child. What happens is that shortly after fertilization, you have one cell, then it divides to become 2, then 4, 8, 16, 32. So there is a point early on within the very first few days of a life after conception that the baby is literally just a cluster of cells. Nothing has differentiated yet. We don't have separate bone cells or eye cells or heart cells at this point. It's simply a cluster. And even at that point, just a few days old, God sees us. And this is not just a passive observation, but to be seen by God implies his love of us. He has set his affection upon us and to save us according to his purpose. And in your book, they were all written. All refers to the whole, all, and every. In the King James Version, they take the all to refer back up to the members of the body, all of the parts of us that are made together. In the NIV and the New King James, they take the all to refer to the days that's going to come in the phrase below. But either way, all of our members or all of our days that God has planned for us, God is in charge of all of them, and that is good news for us. And in your book, they were all written, the days fashioned for me. This is the most common Hebrew word for day. It's the one that occurs recurrently throughout Genesis 1, typically referring to the 24-hour period. It literally comes from the word which means to be hot, and it refers to the warm hours of the day. So we see a day specified by a set of warm hours, and a set of warm hours, and a set of warm hours, and we see how these occur periodically with the nights being cooler. I may be taking some liberties here, but to extrapolate that to that it's the warm hours of a day, the womb is also warm and a secure and growing environment for the young baby. That is, the baby is also within spending the days in the warm environment of the womb. Fashioned. This is another one of the neat creative words we see in this verse. It literally means to squeeze into shape or to mold as a potter would into a form that he has previously determined. So God molds, working by his hands just like he formed Adam out of the dust of the ground, and determines all our days as he makes and fashions all our members. So we are created and set from the time of conception at the time appointed by God before the foundation of the earth. But he takes special care as he works with this. Again, it's not the picture of a deist God who has round up the whole process and let it run, but he's intimately involved in this creation work that's going on, even as the baby goes basically through a creation process as we continue to multiply on the earth. So in your book, they were all written, the days fashioned for me, when as yet they were none of them. So as we take all these words together and we look at the reflexes and how the mother and the baby's body has to work together for this dance of labor, and as we look at these verses in the Psalms, how God has made us and formed us and called us from before we were born, and looking at how he has made us, the analogy of an embroiderer, the analogy of a potter, the analogy of someone hiding a treasure in a secret place. God has designed these reflexes that literally shape us for who we are, for our body, and he has patterned the birth process. He has woven together the movements of the mother and the baby. He molds by the pressure of the contractions. All of these steps that lead to birth are marvelous, miraculous, singular, distinguished, and wonderful, and appointed so that we can live out the days that God has fashioned for us. He works as an architect, as an embroiderer, a potter, all skillfully done to form us and to protect us. Therefore, our response is to submit to his lordship and to revere him, that I may then follow and to revere him, that image in both God and what we see in our fellow man, and as we respond with praise. Thank you very much. A very good, okay, yes, a very good question. They still will have these reflexes present because they are in place assuming that the baby's going to have a natural birth. So we won't see any change in the reflexes just because they weren't born. One of the biggest things that I like to point out, the difference between a cesarean baby and a naturally birthed baby, is that when we don't have the cranial molding to set that, and then the expansion with the first breath to set that cranial rhythm, that can sometimes cause a few problems in the nervous system, or with the shape of the baby's head because it didn't go through that specific overlapping process and then coming back out again. Another big thing we see is that when the baby doesn't go through that infant Heimlich maneuver,